It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. My lucky day. It's my lucky day. Don't need a pot of gold.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today. Today is August the 7th, and I want to welcome you to episode 15 of Coffee and Cloud Native. 15. That's like bigger than zero. My name is Adrian Goins. Every night, I scour the internet for news and content related to Kubernetes and Cloud Native, and every day, you'll find me here to share the bits that I find interesting. This is a curated list of content. I go through around 200 submissions every night, and I select around 10 of them for the next day's show. If I wouldn't use it, I won't be talking about it. So if you're watching, now or in the future, please click the thumbs up button on the video so the YouTube algorithm shares it with other people. I love putting this show together for you because it helps me end each day with knowledge that I didn't have when the day began. I'm grateful that you're here with me because we can all learn and we can grow together. We only have a half an hour and I'm committed to ending on time today, so let's get started. First of all, who we got in the chat? Good morning, Marcel. Morning, Peter. Noon. Renee? Good afternoon, Renee. Michael. Oh, Michael, don't worry. I will keep doing the videos. Guaranteed. Morning, Silvina. Sebastian, hola. Ariel. Binoy. Nice. We got a good crowd here today. I have some stuff to talk about. And you all know exactly what it is. What? Microsoft? Yeah, they released the open service mesh. But you already knew about that, so let's just talk about something else. What do you say? First of all, let me pause this video over there where it's wasting my bandwidth. No, I'm kidding. We'll talk about this. First of all, they get the award for the best reinvention of self since like Madonna. Like Microsoft has done a fantastic job of really rounding the corner and convincing everybody that they're really just a really good guy. But remember who you're talking about here. Like, can we trust them? They are a mega corporation, and there's no money in doing things for free. So I look at everything that they do, and I try to figure out what's the angle. Like maybe it's just because I'm from New York. I'm like, yeah, you got some free stuff for me. What am I paying? You don't actually have to answer whether or not we can trust them. Because, other than just making stuff up, we don't really know. Their behavior speaks for itself. And the nice thing about this is that this is open source. It's being donated to the CNCF. It's tied to the Service Mesh interface, which Solo helped launch back in 2019 and has actively participated in. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So it's all of these things. But is it actually necessary? I don't know. I mean, is it a wolf in sheep's clothing? Is it designed to take market share from Istio, which in turn takes market share from companies who've gone all in on Istio, companies who coincidentally compete with Microsoft? Oh, maybe. Basically, it's a service mesh. It's based on Envoy. It adheres to the service mesh interface for API portability. But it's not the only one. And we can scroll through this article. It's a service mesh. Hooray. Someone in Azure was quoted by TechCrunch or somebody else saying that it's a lighter weight version of Istio. If you have to launch your product and compare it to something else so that people understand what it is, then that says that it says to me that you don't have confidence that your product can just stand on its own 2 feet. Funny, in my notes I actually say stand on its own 2 legs. I don't think that's the right term, because you really need to stand on your feet. Okay. I'm going to wait before I do anything with this. I like that it's built on the SMI, the Service Mesh Interface. The thing about the SMI is that it's optional. Vendors are participating in it. I'm going to flip back so you don't have to look at my little tiny window there. Vendors are participating in it. And that's good, but they don't have to. And actually, I shouldn't have switched back so quickly because this next article is from a few days ago, and it talks about the SMI project, and it's actually written by Containus, even though it's up on the SMI vendor neutral page. Containers has their own service mesh. It's called Mesh. It treats things differently. It's not based on Envoy like everything else is. It's actually built around traffic as a logical controller, and it doesn't use sidecars. Hold on, close this browser window, and in this article they talk about why they chose to participate in SMI, and then it goes on to explain Mesh. And actually, there's something in here that I thought was really funny. So they talk about various other things like Weaveworks Flagger. They talk about the Service Mesh Hub, and they talk about Rio, which serves as a management plane for Linkerd. I'm thinking that might actually be Rancher. I'd like that. I looked for anything called Rio that has anything to do with Linkerd, and I came up with nothing but this article. So anyway, I just thought that was funny. So they talk about Mesh. All right. There are lots of service meshes out there, and I'll revisit what I said yesterday, that you need to look, I'm not going to tell you what to do. My recommendation is that people look at what they do need in their environment and pick the tool that's right for them, with the criteria of making sure that whatever tool they pick gives them the flexibility to move in the future. Maybe OSM will do that. But right now, OSM is brand new. If you want to install it, well, you can. Here's the repo for it. It's like super, super alpha, so make sure you've got your life jacket on before you jump into the pool. And if you don't want to go through this, you can actually just install it with Arcade. Alex released or merged a change yesterday that allows you to install OSM and an update for Linkerd, along with an update for Cert Manager and something else. An update that allows you to install Ketchup from within Arcade, so you can do your updates for Ketchup, which is kind of super cool. Honestly, I don't think this is news. Not this. Alex's stuff is news. I don't think the service mesh, open service mesh thing is news. Because, think of it this way. Microsoft did it. And everyone's like, oh, Microsoft did it! If somebody else had released this, would anybody care so much? Is Microsoft out there like Robin Hood? Are they fighting for the freedom? Or Tron maybe is a better example. I fight for the users. I don't know. But there's enough question in it for me that I'm just going to kind of sit back and see what happens. If you want to actually use something that gives you all of the stuff that I've described, go look at the Service Mesh Hub from Solo. They were a launch partner with Microsoft in the SMI. Everything that they've built since 2019 has supported the SMI. And Service Mesh Hub, well, it's like an overlord for service mesh. You can use it to install other service meshes, including Istio, Linkerd, AWS App Mesh. Where's their list of meshes down here? Look at all this. AWS App Mesh, Consul, Istio, Kuma from Kong, Linkerd, Mesh by Containers, OpenShift, Tetrate, NSX Mesh. Not only can you install all of these things with the Service Mesh Hub, but they give you a unified configuration language that allows you to manage all of them in a multi-cloud environment. And you can bet that as soon as it makes sense, OSM is going to be in there too. If you go with a tool like this, where you get everything that you would get from the other one, but you also get portability, interoperability, flexibility, and freedom. And those are things that I think are really important. Let's see what the chat has to say about all of this. Yeah. Okay, so Nuno says it's already been given to the CNCF. Yeah, they say they're going to give it to the CNCF, and it's not that bad. No, I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm not saying that like it's not bad. Is it necessary? I just don't think it's necessary. It doesn't, at least so far, it doesn't do anything that isn't already done by something else. It's a service mesh based on Envoy. There are lots of service meshes based on Envoy. It clutters the market, in my opinion. These are my opinions. These are just entirely my opinions, and I'm completely willing to be wrong. Sometimes I am. Next up, Kelsey's new mesh system. Right, yeah, I'm going to have a service mesh. My mom's got a service mesh coming out next Tuesday. Okay, now Nuno talks about Istio going to the Google Foundation. No, that's actually not true, or it's up for debate. Google launched their foundation for managing trademarks. They haven't given Istio to the CNCF. They were going to, but that the new foundation doesn't own Istio. The new foundation exists solely for managing trademarks of open source projects, whatever. It's entirely possible that governance of the Istio project could still go to the CNCF, but trademark management still stays in the Google Foundation. And any other open source project can also join the Google Foundation. And basically, they're a bulldog for defending trademarks. If somebody started, if I have a little open source, or take Alex Ellis. Alex has a bunch of really cool open source projects, but he's a guy with a couple of people working for him and doesn't have a giant legal team. If somebody started taking the OpenFast logo and slapping it on what they're like their own cloned version of Lambda or something like that, he may not have the resources to go and fight. But if he belongs to this Google Foundation, they will fight for him. They are actually more Tron-like, but it's just for trademarks. There's a lot of FUD out there about how Istio is going over to this and people are mad and stuff. Just trademarks. I mean, there's nothing that says that Google won't just do whatever they want with it anyway, because they are. All right. Yeah, Renee says Arcade is becoming the go-to tool for infrastructure plumbing. He's cranking out support for stuff. I want to see more things in Arcade. I like its flexibility. I like what you can do with it. I really like that you can update, catch up with it. Let's move on. I knew I was going to spend a bunch of time on that today. And I've got some other stuff that I want to talk about. So next up, back in 1996, when I was just a young pup, I was hanging out at Cafe Netherworld in Denver, Colorado. Anybody who's watching this from Colorado, you probably remember Netherworld. You probably remember me. Anyway, I saw my friend Eric, who owned the cafe. It was like a cool cyber cafe / sports bar for goth people in Capitol Hill in Denver. Eric was doing real-time web development where he had a terminal window open and a browser window open, and he would like do HTML in the terminal, and he would save and he would refresh the browser. But it was like saving out to the internet and then coming back to the browser. And he was doing real-time development, and it was like I was watching magic. Well, it is magic. Devspace is kind of like that, but for Kubernetes and containers. There's not enough time in this show to go into the depth of what this thing can do. But basically, instead of going through the whole process of like code, build a container, push it out somewhere, test it, bring it down, update it, out there, and then like you're going through this time suck of all of this intermediary stuff, this digs a tunnel straight through to your other environment, which for me is going to be Kubernetes, but it works elsewhere. And as you're doing stuff, it's like updating the internals of a shell container out there so that you can see your changes in real time. It's straight up wizardry. But it does a lot more than that. There's an IDE for it. It works with clusters on your local machine just as well as clusters out in the cloud. It works on the cluster that my mom's got at her house. Do you have a cluster at your mom's house? I mean, our moms deserve Kubernetes clusters, right? I mean, like my mom's cluster runs her recipe collection and the guest book that her friends sign when they come over. Oh, wait, no? This isn't 1996 anymore? Anyway. Devspace. Universe changing. They just released version 5. Check it out. We need like synthwave music. Like all of these bands that are coming out doing like the Stranger Things kind of purple neon stuff. I should have some purple neon in here and we can all pretend that it's the 80s. I'll get like, pop my collar and get some shoulder pads. No. There's a company called Architect who just came out with DevOps as a service platform. No. So that sounds like DevOps as a service platform. They came out with a platform for dev. What does that even mean? That's where I was last night. First of all, it doesn't really make a very good acronym. DOAAS, DOAS, no. DevOps as a service. They aim to simplify the deployment of microservice applications by treating the application as a whole unit. And it's pretty cool. You build, they have a word for it. You build a template. I'm looking at my notes. Whatever. So I'll just scroll down to where they have it. Oh my god, it's the CNCF landscape page, the most scariest infographic to ever be created. Oh, it's not here. It's not there. No. All right, I have to go to their docs to find it. Anyway, you build this thing, and you give it to them, and it builds this graph of all of the dependencies of the microservices in your application. And then it figures out what depends on what, and it's prepared to deploy that. But it pauses there, and it provides information. I'm going to go to their docs page because it's much cooler. It provides information on... Nope, not there. Quick start, maybe? I should have had the other window open. Architect. All right, so it builds this whole relationship thing. It tells the operators what's going to change. And then you can use it to actually push stuff out to whatever your platform is. It automatically creates all of the network policies so that there's restricted communication between the things just on the stuff that they need to communicate between and on and with and for and through and by, and it looks pretty cool. I'm doing a terrible job of explaining it. So yeah, automatic generation of network policies between components. It presents to operators what needs to change in an environment for a deploy to succeed. Because it looks at the application as a holistic everything, there are fewer surprises that a change to one microservice might break something for another one. It's kind of funny because if you look at it and you take a step back, like once upon a time we had monolithic applications and then we started doing microservices, and this kind of takes all your microservices and packages it up to look at it like it's a monolith. But yeah, it looks like it'll do some cool stuff. They have a free tier. It just launched yesterday. It's multi-platform. It'll work with Kubernetes and ECS for sure. It'll work with other platforms as the little engines get written for them. You can take it for a spin without having to worry about, what it's going to... Well, actually, that's not true. You kind of have to worry a little bit about what it's going to cost, because they basically got two options. Free, and give us a call. I don't like when companies do that. The idea there is that if they tell you what it's going to cost, you'll just freak out and leave out of context to make an appropriate decision. But the idea that I'm going to call them and be like, this is amazing, how much money? Like, there's a joke that I say, which is if you have to ask what it costs, you can't afford it. Well, that's what they're telling me. They're telling me that if they can't tell me what it costs, then it's just too expensive. But they have a free tier. So if you want to do this for development and stuff and take it for a spin, maybe it's awesome enough that you can call them and find out what the other option is. Let's talk about monitoring etcd. Let's talk about running out of time. Sysdig wrote an article about how to modify an etcd installation so you can get metrics out of it, because it's apparently not intuitive and requires a bunch of certificate nonsense. First of all, they explain what etcd is. Yes, we know. So here's how to configure the admin interface for it, followed by a sample of pulling metrics out. But then they go into explaining, how you get Prometheus to talk to it, and then what do you look for in etcd? And I thought this was great. What inside of the environment do you need to care about, and what does it mean? So they continue to give you examples of leader changes, consensus proposal. They explain Raft up above, which is pretty cool. Disk sync duration. So all of these metrics that you can pull out and how to understand them. And then, because it's Sysdig, they say, if you're using Sysdig Monitor, here's some extra stuff that you can do to do all that graphing for you. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and I love Sysdig for it. They are experts in a particular problem space. It's possible to solve problems without using their products, and I like that their articles say, hey, you could take all of this information and go solve it on your own. But if you want to do it faster and easier, we've got something that can help you do that. They probably even tell you the price. Ooh, dig, zing. Simulator. How's that for a graphic, huh? Simulator creates vulnerable Kubernetes clusters that you can hack into and either own or fix. It's intentionally designed to build a safe environment for penetration testing and learning. It builds an AWS environment for you, and it's kind of like a shell. So once you're in there, you can launch scenarios and then proceed to go through the various scenarios, and when you're done, you can tear down the environment. That graphic is impossible to read. So you start a task, it's got hints, it kind of feels a little bit like Zork or something like that, but for penetration testing of Kubernetes clusters. When you're done, you blow it away. Very neat tool, which leads me into KubiScan, which this article just talks about, uses some examples of what people were able to find when using KubiScan, and some people apparently got some bounties from Azure for finding vulnerable Kubernetes clusters. But KubiScan itself is over here. It's made by CyberArk, and this scans clusters for risky roles and permissions that can be used for privilege escalation inside of a cluster. And if you scroll down to the bottom, they've got this little 2-minute video that you can watch, which shows how somebody was able to find a pod with a service account, iterate what permissions it had, find other roles, and just climb their way right up until they got to something that was able to read secrets in the cluster. And it's like 1 minute and 40 seconds long. It is scary. I mean, easy. Both. KubiScan, easy to use. It'll help you secure your clusters. 5 reasons to run Kubernetes on your Raspberry Pi home lab. Let me check the chat here. Oh no, somebody was complaining about sound stuttering. Well, sorry. That's the internet. Hello, Chaim from Israel. Thanks for joining. Okay, yeah, so people are just talking about the stuff that I said. Cool. Okay, so 5 reasons to run Kubernetes on your Raspberry Pi home lab. This is a marketing trick, but there's probably good information in there anyway. If you go and get the free ebook, this is actually supported by Red Hat, so it's going to tell you how to install Red Hat stuff on your Raspberry Pi, particularly OKD and other Red Hat tooling, and that's fine. It's just not obvious from this article. What this article talks about is why would you want to have a home lab? And that's what I thought was great. You can do all sorts of stuff if you have Kubernetes running in your house or your mom's house. You can run a NAS, you can run a media player, you can use it for education and upskilling. When I talk about backups, I talk about the easier something is to do, the more likely we are to do it. When I started learning Kubernetes, I hated Kubernetes. I hated the idea of it, but mostly I hated that it was different than what I was doing, that it was something I didn't understand, and that it was going to require work to get back to where I felt like I already had been the day before. So I just responded by hating it. And then I looked at that and I said, well, what's the best way to get through this? And I just ripped out my rancher cattle cluster and I put in a Kubernetes cluster. And I said, there you go. If you want to learn how to do anything, if you want to run stuff in your house that you were running yesterday, you're going to have to figure this out. Immersion is the best way to overcome resistance to new things. Just put yourself in the middle of it and be like, you have no choice but to work through it. And when you come out the other side, invariably, you'll be better for having done so. Having a Kubernetes cluster in your house will give you a path to spending time with Kubernetes, forcing yourself to do things in that cluster, like run Plex, things that you'll enjoy. Run Nextcloud, run a web server, run whatever, but learning how to do it in Kubernetes results in you learning how to do new things, and that moves you forward in life, and you can make more money, and all of the other things that go along with it. Buy Lambos. The thing that nobody talks about with Raspberry Pis is, well, they do talk about it, but usually people find out about it after it happened, is SSD card exhaustion. Pis use, sorry, did I say SSD? SD card. We need more letters in the alphabet. SD card exhaustion. They use the little SD cards, these things, but smaller. These are not meant to be written to like disks. So you'll be just cruising along, your Pi is doing great, and then one day it goes away and it doesn't reboot. And that's because this is dead. There are ways around that. So it's not a problem with the Pis. Just understand if you're going to build out a Pi cluster, expect that you're going to need to rebuild your SD cards once a year or more often, depending on how frequently you're writing to them. Or you need to make sure that you make that a read-only partition and you plug an external USB hard drive in that can actually do, regular media. Raspberry Pis are great. If they're not very powerful. So you will hit a boundary of what you can do with it. If you want something that's a little bit more badass, I run my cluster. I have a 5-node Proxmox cluster here in the house. 4 nodes are made by a company called Protectly. And if you look in the video description for any of the videos, you'll see a link to my gear. That takes you to kit.co. And it's out of date. I have way more gear than that now. I need to update it. But there are links for the Protectly servers. They're more expensive, but they're full-fledged fanless PCs that are great. They make no noise. You just stick them in a closet somewhere and they'll be fine. But if you don't have money for those and you don't have money for Raspberry Pis and you still want to do something, look at K3D. I'm sorry that this is like a Rancher promotion. It's not a Rancher promotion. This is an article that somebody wrote for IT Next. But K3D lets you run K3S in Docker on your local machine. And it's pretty cool. Like you can just spin up clusters. You can spin up multiple clusters. K3S is already really lightweight, so it's great for machines that don't have a lot of RAM. But you can have a Kubernetes cluster on your desktop, whether it's a Mac or a Linux box. If you're on a Linux box, you can actually communicate directly with the clusters themselves. If you're on a Mac, you have to tunnel ports through to be able to access the ports because the Mac network doesn't talk to the virtual machine network where all of the containers actually run. So this is an article on how to install K3D. It's specific to a Mac, but the same instructions would apply for anything else. And now we're on to the tool of the day. Tool of the day. Tool of the day. Node Policy Webhook. This is a tool that helps you with node selector, node affinity, and tolerations for your workloads. It basically moves those definitions out of the resources themselves and creates a template. So if you have multiple things that would end up with the same toleration or node selector or node affinity, you create a template called a node policy profile. There it is right here. And then you reference this node policy profile with an annotation in the resources. And that's it. It's just designed to make things a little bit easier so that you can drink more coffee and play more Quake. Did anybody get Quake up and running yesterday? If so, tell me in the chat. It's Friday. I'm hoping that everybody just takes a couple hours today and goes and plays a Quake in their browser. Devin says running K3S HA Master blew up 3 SD cards. DQ-Lite is not happy with SD cards. Don't use DQ-Lite with K3S. It's not. It's coming out in May. Darren merged something to actually. They're starting to test an embedded etcd instead because DQ-Lite has issues. It has bizarre issues. I built a cluster with DQ-Lite, not on our Pis, and something happened, the master rebooted, and then it just seg-faulted. It would never come up again. I had to rebuild the entire cluster from scratch. So, no DQ-Lite. Okay, that's it. I always forget that I have like a 2-minute outro. This is cool. All of you are cool. Thank you for coming in the chat. Read Only Friday, Quake Weekend, all of these things. Let's get out of here. So that's all I've got for today. Of course, I will post all of the links in the video description and the Git repository as soon as the show ends. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll get a notification when that happens. You'll also see all the tweets throughout the day for the individual things. If there's something you'd like me to consider for the show, hit me up and let me know. My contact details are in the video description, or you can tweet with the CNCN hashtag and I will pick it up. And if I mentioned a tool that you use, tell me in the comments. If you liked what you saw, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, be sure to click the little bell to get notifications when the next show starts. I'll be here every weekend. Sorry, that's not true. I'll be here every weekday. I'm so looking forward to the weekend. I'll be here every weekday for as long as there's something to talk about, and I am a chattermouth, so there's always going to be something to talk about. Have a great day, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Keep learning, and I will see you in the next show. Stay safe.